Hello. Hi, there's another video for you. And this one is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. I love talking about it so much when I teach Reiki. And so I thought I would share it in this format for others. I've also written a blog post about it, links to a couple other blog posts that are related. So, anyway, this one is on Reiki effectiveness in science. My passion is where science meets spirit because what we're finding is that the intersections, especially through the studies of quantum physics, it's just like everything is becoming all like one big thing. And that's so beautiful. And a lot of the queries that science has posed into the world, we're finding the answers in spirit, and then science is catching up with that. So I feel like such a really promising intersection to explore. So, but a lot of people ask, like, how do you know Reiki works? And there's actually been some documented studies that can help inform us. And so I want to be able to share these with you. For one thing, there are some Reiki studies that have been proven by science. And what I wanted to do was look at, well, first of all, there's not a lot of incentive in the world for research to be done on energy healing. The medical industry is really huge, and I really honor the contributions that they have made to our healing, and yet there's a whole nother world to explore around that. And the more we learn that we are more energy and spirit than we are matter, it seems to matter. so but what I did is I tried to look at studies that had really strong evidence and significant sample sizes, and that were in peer-reviewed journals and things like that, rather than just looking at any old thing, because science is a slippery slope. Like, I can do a survey on the corner and talk to 20 people and categorize their answers about anything and call that science. Well, we want to be a little bit more methodical about it, right? So there have been some studies that I've come across that seem like they're really promising. So one is that they're from Reiki and from other healing modalities, energy healing modalities, and healing prayers, is that there can be accelerated recovery from surgery. And that afterward, they noticed that patients had improved mental attitude, reduced negative effects, such as depression, pain, organ rejection, when Reiki is shared during surgery. So that's really interesting, huh? Another is that there's increased relaxation, less pain, better sleep, and increased appetite, and better cooperation in hospitals. And I saw this, I think it was in Texas. There was this one hospital where they had Reiki level 2 practitioners who would go around into all the different hospital rooms to the beds, and they would offer, they didn't give a real detailed explanation of what Reiki is, but they offered to pray with the people, or lay hands, or whatever kind of matched the patient's worldview, and then they would share Reiki, and they found all kinds of better outcomes for those patients. And also, reduced heart rate and blood pressure with Reiki, which can be really important for some people. Enhanced immune system by increasing white blood cells with Reiki, which is great. Improvement of red blood cells for those attuned to Reiki. And for a lot of you who know, like, my partner had extreme severe anemia at one point and went through what our doctor said. We went through $1 million worth of tests on you, and we don't know why you got sick, and we don't know why you got better, but we do. It was a lot of energy work going on at that time, and I feel like he's a miracle. Another is improvement in red blood cells for those with a significant illness receiving laying on of hands. Faster healing of minor wounds when treated in person or by distance through a trained healer. And another one is healthier outcomes and extended life for AIDS patients through distance prayer. This one was interesting because it was a small sample size. There were only 20 people who were who were in the control group who received no prayer, and 20 people who received the prayer. But this is back way back in the day when HIV and AIDS were a life sentence. And when they did this study, they found out of the samples, they found that those who received the Reiki or the prayer had 19 of 20 survive. And of those who were in the control group without the prayer, they only had one survive and 19 who had passed during the study. So even though the sample sizes are small, it's really significant. Um, so I felt to include it. Um, so those are just some unique studies, but let's talk about a little bit of a different thing. So, how many of you know who Bruce Lipton is? Mhm. I highly recommend his work. So he's the author of Biology of Belief and Spontaneous Evolution as a co-author. And also he has an audio collection called Wisdom of the Cells. I don't know if anybody listens to CDs anymore, but when I was going into coach training and when I was traveling a lot for my work, my former career, I used to listen to those like over and over and over again. And he is so brilliant. He has so much to share. So if you're interested in any of those topics or even looking at all of the YouTube videos he has, he's got a lot of really, really great things up there to talk about and really support our evolution. And he also has a lot of research in all of those resources. But anyway, so I can't even remember what year it was. Came across an invitation to attend a one-day lecture for Bruce Lipton in Grass Valley. And so I just had to get tickets for all of us that I knew were just huge fans and go and spend the day with him. And it was one of the most remarkable days ever. So Bruce Lipton is a medical doctor and a researcher. He was a cellular biologist who was formerly a stem cell researcher, one of the first, as well as a medical school teacher at Stanford, as well as other institutions. And he is an internationally recognized authority in bridging science and spirit. That's my jam. So I just love this guy. And he's one of the pioneers of epigenetics, the study of above the cells. So, here's a little bit about his story from what I put together in his materials and in his lecture. So here he is, he's a medical school doctor, and one of the things that he was teaching is called the central dogma. Now, the central dogma, which is an interesting word for something, dogma, that's taught in a science school, right? Just putting that out there. So the central dogma is basically that our DNA is our destiny. So our DNA affects our RNA, affects our protein, which is our expression of our DNA in the world. But what he was finding through the research is that it flows both ways. It goes from the proteins to the RNA to the DNA. So that in essence, the environment is super important to the expression of DNA. And so this is important because this is empowering. It doesn't make us a slave to our genetics. We actually have a lot of influence based on how we construct and adapt to our environments in creating health for ourselves. So that's good news, right? Well, he said that about 5% of the things that go haywire with us that cause disease are genetically or like birth defect kind of related things. And about 95% are not. So what do we attribute that 95% to? Well, as I said, it's your environment. And so what do we mean by environment? We mean one thing, trauma. And he says, for God's sakes, if you get in a car accident and you're hanging on the side of the road with your guts out, do get yourself to a hospital. Otherwise, hospitals aren't necessarily the safest place for us to go. Spoken from a medical doctor. So there's a lot of things with iatrogenic issues related to medical treatment. And sometimes we need that. And sometimes, sometimes we want to go other ways. Just saying. And so the other one is toxins. So trauma, toxins. Well, as we know, this environment that we live in, this world that we live in, thanks to humanity, has become a very toxic soup. And so the foods that we're eating are containing lots of chemicals, the air that we're breathing, the rain that's falling from the sky, the things we're spraying on the earth. I mean, let's face it, we've got some issues. And so, yes, taking care of our toxicity level as much as we possibly can definitely improve our environment. And we have access to information and resources for doing that, although it's a big and monumental and ongoing task, right? So we have trauma, we have toxins. So what's the other one? Thoughts. Thoughts. It's in our environment. It's on the inside environment, it's on the outside environment. Like thoughts. It's a really big part of it. And we all know how our thinking can make us crazy because we're humans, right? Unless we're enlightened, thoughts can make us crazy. And the thoughts get tricky too. There's another 5%, 95% thing. Only about 5% of our thoughts are conscious, as in we're aware of them. And about 95% of our thoughts are subconscious, as in we may not ever be aware of them. And one of the ways that that comes to be, well, first of all, it's really great. I'm so glad I have a subconscious mind because I can drive from here down to the end of the street and probably not remember a single lick of it because I've got so much going on in here. But I know how to drive my car. I know how to get there safely. If something happened and it jumped out at me, then I know my conscious mind would kick right in. So I don't have to be hyper vigilant. I don't have to remember how to read, how to tie my shoes every single time I do it. I have like certain subconscious mechanisms in there that just kick in for me and I don't even really have to think about it. So yeah, thank you for that. The subconscious mind is super powerful and super beneficial. It really allows us to do so many things. And also in our developmental stages, when we're young, about to 6 years old or so, our brain waves are in such a state that we are like open funnels. So you could see like everything can come into our consciousness and we take it in without any filters whatsoever. So everything that we learn when we're little kids, in utero and as young children, as infants and young children, everything goes in without any filter. So think about the messaging that we may have had in our families, in our communities, of like, money is the root of all evil. You'll never amount to anything. No pain, no gain. Um, and even if we had ideal parents who are really conscious, which in my age range is like I don't know of any. There's hope. I see a lot of hope for our younger parents these days. But even if we had ideal upbringing, we still had schools and communities. We still may have had bullies on the playground, or or relatives that weren't very kind to us. So what are the messages that we received? And I know like so many of us could have core wounds around abandonment and betrayal and worthiness and all those things. So I'm definitely like been the poster child for all of those things and I know all about it. And one of the really wonderful things is that energy medicine, such as Reiki and life coaching and Psych K and like all the things, can really help to reveal our subconscious patterns and thoughts and beliefs and bring them into the light of day so that we can heal and rewrite those programs. So if you like a lot of people are really into the law of attraction. I see it as a really flawed system in a lot of ways. But there's some real beauty in it and some utility in it. But if we're trying to engage the law of attraction and everything that we really want or any particular things that we really want just don't seem to ever manifest, then the place to look at, he says, is our subconscious programming. So we may have something in there that is a literal block to being able to manifest that in our lives. And so energy medicine may very well be the path to improving our quality of life, improving our health. And he even says, Bruce Lipton even says, this is the way of our future, to look at how like the world of energy can support us in our evolution. And boy, there's so much more on that we could go into. But we'll stay to the topic. So this new biology, you know, of mastery and through epigenetics is just such a powerful thing. And one of the things that he talked about was how, well, as he was teaching, as he decided to change his course of teaching medical school based on the research that he was seeing in the labs. So essentially, as a researcher, he had petri dishes of similar cells, and that he would expose them to completely different environments and get completely different results. And so, as he would go into the medical school to teach that, like, wait a minute, the sexual dogma may not be quite what we thought it was. And we need to really challenge our beliefs around the role of the environment. And so that basically didn't get him too many kudos. It was problematic, and he ended up having to go off away to finish his research outside of the United States, Grenada, and he ended up there talking about how his life was kind of in ruin, his relationships were in ruin. He was really feeling like he was not very accomplished at that point in his life, and he was also a complete atheist. And as he continued his research and he looked further into the cell to find out why is it so responsive to the environment, and he found that the brain of the cell basically is in the epidermis of the cell, like the perimeter, the membrane of the cell on the outside, not like deep in the nucleus, like we might think a brain would be, like nice and protected inside the center. So it was on the perimeter of the cell, and so it's so permeable to everything. And I have to love how he would talk about, like, this created for him a spiritual awakening, and to me that is adorable. So I have to love that. Okay, so so this is all really really quite amazing, and it empowers us so much, and it gives us a whole new realm to explore in, where we can look at, like, the science of and the science and studies of energy medicine, which of course is in its infancy, but we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn about the world that we live in. So there's another piece that I want to share about, like, in a more practical level of how Reiki works in terms of our central nervous system. So we have different modes that our nervous system operates in. So you've probably heard about this. Like, our parasympathetic nervous system is like our resting state. This is when our cells are restoring themselves and assimilating nutrition, and they're dividing and doing all the things that cells are supposed to do in order to keep us healthy. And that's a beautiful way to be. And it's meant to be our operating system for most of our day and our night. And the other is the sympathetic nervous system. And this is the part of the nervous system that creates a fight, flight, or freeze response. And I would also add fawn, which is probably one of my chief modes to go through, or to fornicate. So there's, like, all this energy goes into doing something in order to override the anxiety. But mostly it's meant to either run away or fight a saber-toothed tiger. And so, how often do we face saber-toothed tigers on our trail anymore? And some of us may live in environments where we do face more physiological danger than others of us do. But regardless, we all seem to be living in a heightened sympathetic nervous system state for much of our lives. So we're trying to eat lunch and answer email, and all of a sudden that email comes in that causes our whole gut to clench up and our mind to start racing, and we start imagining the worst case scenarios. And man, it's hard to live that way, and I've certainly done my share of it. Um, and I'm grateful for Reiki and other tools that have helped me to create a really different kind of experience where my parasympathetic system actually knows how to operate and gets lots of opportunities to do that. But one of the things that's really cool is when people are receiving Reiki, which promotes relaxation and stress reduction, they go into parasympathetic. And one of the ways we can tell almost right away is their stomach will start gurgling. And so it's like a sign that finally, like, they get to start assimilating nutrition in a way that's healthy for their bodies, rather than, rather than the way we usually do digestion when we're all on edge. And so I think that that is a really beautiful thing. And also giving Reiki, we can often have that experience as well. So we can just reassure our clients, so it's okay. This is actually a really good sign that you're starting to relax and flow into the energy. And don't worry about any gurgling noises. We can handle that for sure. So that's a lot, I know. But I wanna go into a couple other things that, Bruce Lipton also talked about. And the topic was spontaneous, healing, and I also wrote a separate blog post on this. But spontaneous healing, is actually maybe a little bit of a misnomer because it doesn't necessarily mean that it happened all at one time, but most often, like in the research, what they looked at is people who received a terminal diagnosis and then did not die. So what happened there? So there were two possible stories that were substantiated by the research, and one of them is a story like this. So a person gets a life-threatening disease, and they basically say, "You know what? I know I've been ignoring my intuition. I haven't been paying attention to my health. I know I've needed to make changes for a while. And you know what? I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to honor my intuition. I'm going to do absolutely what I know I have to do, and I'm going to follow. I'm going to just commit myself completely to my healing journey." And so um one of the people that comes to mind when I think about this is somebody named Chris Carr, and her name is spelled Kris Carr, and some of you may know her. Tells her story quite a lot on the internet, has a wonderful presence on the internet, and she was picked up as a Hay House author as well a while ago. But she was diagnosed with stage 4, incurable, untreatable cancer. And now, what could be more frightening than that? And she was very sick. And so she started a regime of of doing Reiki, or I'm sorry, excuse me, doing yoga. And she'd say, "Well, I'm just laying in bed and I'm doing savasana, I'm doing corpse pose, but I'm not just laying here, I'm doing Reiki." She was focusing her awareness, she was focused on her healing, being present, taking care of her mind. And she got really into organic food and juicing and really feeding herself nutritionally. And so she shares a lot of that information, and she ended up writing a book called Crazy Sexy Cancer. And she went out to go find a publisher, and everybody was like, "Oh, no. No, 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 no." So she did manage to get the book out there, and she was doing a whole lot of coaching with people who are also medical mysteries, and were having trouble finding ways to help themselves. And then she thought at one point, "Oh my gosh, all these organic cucumbers are really, really expensive, and I've been selling off everything I have to be able to heal and help other people. And so maybe I need to start, monetizing this business a little bit," which is how she created such a big footprint in the world. Thank goodness, because so many people have been, supported and guided through her. So just a cute little aside. The first time that I ever heard about Chris Carr was Set the Wayback Machine, when Oprah Winfrey had Dr. Oz on her show, and he Dr. Oz did an interview with her, and they're in her kitchen in the morning, and she's getting out the vegetables to make her juice, and she's making them a cup of herbal tea, and she feels like, as I remember, she's like, I like the vegetables to be able to warm up to room temperature before I juice them, so I enjoy my cup of tea, and it's lovely to have you here with me. And so they talk about a lot of her routine and her story and stuff like that, and he says, "Well, what did you used to have for breakfast?" And she goes, "Martinis." And talk about a life a plot twist in a person's life, so that was adorable, and I wanted to share it. And so that is one of the stories, to just dig in and do everything you need to know, like everything you need to do for your own healing, to honor your own your intuition and follow your path completely. And this is one of the reasons why with my students I say I never recommend that anybody um, honor any particular choice for their own healing journey. I honor when, people choose for their Western medicine journey, whatever they choose for their alternative or for Eastern medicine, like whatever they feel is and intuit is their path. Absolutely. It's actually none of my business. I'm happy to support anybody and however I may, and that they feel called to show up for healing. So I'll share healing, I'll share the teachings, I'll share anything that I can with them that will empower them as their own healer. But I truly know in my heart that people are their own healers. I'm just here as a support on the way, just like we all need support on the way. So I just want to be really clear about that. Um, that Reiki works amazing with along with psychotherapy, along with chemotherapy or radiation or any other Western medicine treatments. With chemo and radiation, I noticed that patients and clients will be able to detox much faster, have a better quality of life, and at the same time, they're doing the deeper healing because there were some problematic um, uh, uh, existences in their lives that contributed to them being out of balance and getting sick. So how can we look at those deeper issues of their beingness and help them heal that? And psychotherapy is the same way. Like, it's so powerful. I've had clients who would go back and forth and say, like, to their therapist, "Denise says we should look at this," and then they come back and they say, "My therapist said we should look at this," and then we just kinda go back and forth together and get to that, like, work energetically at the same that we're working with, psychologically. It's so powerful. Okay, so that's the one occurrence. The second one is called The Bucket List, and, how many of you remember the movie with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson called The Bucket List? I rewatched it, recently. I think it's on Netflix again, and it was just as good the second time as it was the first time. So it's a story of 2 gentlemen who have a terminal diagnosis, and they are, crotchety old guys, and they both decide that, "You know what? We've lived our lives for all of these other agendas that weren't really true to our hearts. We've worked ourselves to death. We've done all the things. We're just gonna go run away and focus on the things that we always wanted to do in our lives, but we always thought we would get to them some other time." And so they go off on an adventure together in Europe and do all these crazy things, and one of them actually has a spontaneous remission and survives his cancer. And I thought that that was just such a beautiful illustration of, like, a way that we all can access research, but it actually is supported by research. So that is so promising. Um, yeah, and what's interesting is I feel like those 2 different case studies are almost contrary. One is putting all your energy into healing and what you know you need to do, and the other is ignoring it completely. So there, take it for what you will what you will. Um, yeah, so I guess, there's probably a million things more, like, looking at, like, the energies of people and how we may be incongruent and how we may be compatible and how some people feel really good and some people don't. And like everything in the world is basically like that, like good vibes or bad vibes, but it's not good or bad. It's actually just congruency. So there's so much to learn about how energy affects us, and that informs our platform for learning more about energy medicine, which I do feel like if you're a true cynic, I totally get it. And um maybe give it a try, you never know. So thanks for joining me again. I'm so happy to be here and to share this with you. Love you all.